In Chapter 10, we'll focus on IT infrastructure security policies. We're going to explore the concepts related to information system security policies and discuss the elements of an infrastructure security policy. Also, we're going to examine policies associated with different domains of a typical IT infrastructure and learn about the best practices for creating and maintaining IT policies. So, when creating and organizing IT infrastructure policies, there are three common approaches. You have the functional area. That's policies that can be organized based on different functional areas within the organizations. This approach groups policies according to specific departments or units that are responsible for managing various aspects of the IT infrastructure. So, for example, there may be policies dedicated to network security, policies dedicated to system administration, data management, and user access control. So organizing policies by functional area, this helps ensure that each department has its own set of guidelines and responsibilities. Another approach is to organizing policies by layers of security. This means categorizing policies based on different levels of security measures that are implemented within the IT infrastructure. For instance, in this example, policies may be grouped into physical security, network security, application security, and data security layers. This approach it provides a systematic view of security controls implemented at each layer and helps identify any gaps or overlaps in the security measures. The third way is domain. So the policies can be organized according to different domains or the components of the IT infrastructure. So this approach categorizes policies based on specific areas, such as the network, the servers, database, applications, and user accounts. Each domain is going to have its own set of policies that addresses unique security considerations and the requirements associated with that domain. Now, organizing policies by domains, that helps ensure comprehensive coverage of security controls across all IT infrastructure components. Now, when you choose your way you organize your policies, you want to choose the most suitable approach, and that's going to depend on the organization structure, security objectives, and specific needs. Now, it's important to consider factors such as clarity, ease of implementation, and efficient policy management when deciding on the organization structure of policies. In addition to organizing policies, there are five common types of documents that capture the domain security control requirements within infrastructure's policies framework. The control standards are policy documents that describe the core security control requirements for a specific domain. Control standards provide a set of guidelines and rules that must be followed to ensure the security of the IT infrastructure. So they're going to outline the objectives, principles, and expectations for implementing security controls within the organization. Baseline standards are technical documents that specify the security controls required for a specific technology or system component. These documents are going to provide detailed guidance on configuring and securing the technology to meet the organization's security objectives. Now, baseline standards help establish a consistent and secure baseline configuration across the IT infrastructure. Procedural documents, they outline the process and steps required to implement the controls and baseline standards. They're going to provide instructions and guidelines for executing security-related tasks, such as conducting security assessments, performing vulnerability scans, or responding to security incidents. Procedural documents ensure that security controls are implemented correctly and consistently. Guidelines are optional documents, and they offer recommended policies, standards, or procedures for a particular domain or technology. Now, while these are not mandatory, guidelines provide additional insights and best practices for enhancing security within the IT infrastructure. They're going to serve as a reference for organizations looking to improve their security posture beyond the minimum requirements that are set by the control and baseline standards. The dictionary is something that's commonly used in policies that defines the scope and meaning of the terms within the infrastructure policy framework. So it's establishing standardized language and terminology, and that's used to ensure clear communication and understanding of security concepts and the requirements. So this helps eliminates any confusion and promotes consistency in the interpretation of the policies and standards. Now, when you're creating a standards and process documents within an IT infrastructure policy framework, it is essential to follow a well-defined format. So this format helps ensure the consistency and clarity across different policies and enables an easy reference and understanding. So some of the common sections that are found in these documents, the document number, that's a standard process document, is assigned a unique identification number. This helps in tracking and referencing the document in various contexts. The title of the document reflects the purpose and provides a cohesive description of the subject matter it covers. Standards and process documents, they undergo revisions and updates over time. So including the version number and the date that helps of the document that helps track changes and ensures that the most recent version is being referred to. The purpose section outlines the objectives and intended outcome of the standards or processes. It clarifies the reasons for its existence and sets the context for the subsequent content. The background section provides a brief overview of the factors or events that necessitated the creation of the standards or process. It establishes the context and significance of the document. The standards/process. This is a core section of the document that contains detailed requirements, guidelines, or steps that need to be followed. It's going to outline the specific security controls, measures, or procedures that must be implemented. The roles and responsibilities section identifies the individuals or roles responsible for executing or overseeing the standards and process. So it clarifies the accountability and duties of different stakeholders. The effective dates indicate when the standards or process become applicable and enforceable within an organization. So this ensures that the document's relevance is clear and that is adhered to within the specified time frame. The information assistance section provides contact information and references to additional resources that users can consult for further guidance and clarifications related to the standards or processes. The approval section includes the names and signatures of authorized individuals or committees responsible for reviewing and endorsing the document. This confirms that it is valid and acceptance is within the organization. Finally, the associated resource section includes references to other documents, guidelines, or tools that are associated with the standards or process. It's going to provide additional information and resources that can support the implementation and understanding of the requirements. Now, within IT infrastructure, the workstation domain, this is going to play a crucial role in ensuring the security of individual workstations. So to establish a secure workstation environment, various policies need to be defined and implemented. Some of the common types of policies associated with workstation domain include the control standards. And this focuses on device management and user permissions. So these standards outline the requirements for configuring, securing, and managing the workstation within an organization. They're going to address aspects such as patch management, antivirus software, encryption, user access controls. The control standards should align with the functional responsibilities, and that's ensuring that users have appropriate access based on their roles and responsibilities. The baseline standards provide a specific technology requirements for each type of workstation device used within the organization. These standards may include the hardware and software specifications, configurations, and security settings. They're often developed based on industry best practices or vendor requirements or vendor recommendations or recognized standards from organizations such as the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. Regularly reviewing and updating these standards is critical to address emerging threats and vulnerabilities. Now, procedures in the workstation domain are step by step configuration instructions that guide administrators and users into properly configuring and securing workstations. Some of the topics that may be covered in these procedures include workstation setup, software installation, security configuration, and incident response. Now, by providing these detailed instructions, the procedures ensure consistency and help mitigate potential errors or misconfiguration. Now, the guidelines within the workstation domain, this covers various aspects related to the workstation. For example, acquisition guidelines that specifies preferred vendors or approved hardware software configurations for workstations. Guidelines on active content and mobile code address the handling and uses of potential risky content, such as Java applets or macros. So these guidelines provide recommendations and best practices to ensure a secure and efficient use of workstations. In today's time, the use of mobile devices has become increasingly prevalent in the workplace. So, to ensure the security and proper use of mobile devices within organizations, specific policies need to be established. So, three common policies associated with mobile devices include the bring your own device. This policy allows employees to bring their own personal devices, such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, allows them bring them to the workplace and connect to the organization's network. Now, typically, employees are granted access to a guest network, which segregates their devices from the main organization network. The bring your own device policies, they outline the rules and responsibility of the employees when using their own devices for work-related activities. These policies may cover acceptable use, security requirements, data protection, and device management. Under the choose your own device policy, the organization provides a list of approved devices which the employees can choose for work purposes. So this policy allows employees to select a device that suits their preferences and needs while ensuring the chosen device meets the organization's security and compatibility requirements. Now, the CYOD policies define the process of device selection, provisioning, and management. They may also address issues like device support, software compatibility, and data protection. Finally, the company-owned or personally enabled policies. This involves the organization providing employees with company-owned devices that can be used for personal purposes as well. So within this policies, employees have the advantage of using a device that's provided by the company while still enjoying the flexibility of utilizing it for personal use. Code policies typically outline the terms of personal uses, security measures, and data privacy considerations. Now, they may also cover topics such as data ownership, data backup, and remote wipe capabilities. So, the local area network, this is a critical component of an organization's infrastructure. This is connecting devices and facilitating communications within a confined area. So, to ensure the security and proper functionality of the LAN, there are specific policies that need to be established. Four common types of policies associated with the LAN domain are the control standards, your baseline standards, procedures, and guidelines. So the control standards in the LAN domain, this focuses on implementing security measures to protect the network and its resources. These standards may include the configuration and management of firewalls, um, maybe the implementation of denial of service, of protection mechanisms, Wi-Fi security controls, or Also something that's crucial to the secure wireless network access within the LAN. So control standards should align to the functional responsibilities and define the required security controls for devices and users. Baseline standards are going to provide specific technology requirements for devices within the LAN. They may include guidelines for network segmentation. That's going to separate the LAN into smaller, more secure segments. Traffic monitoring to detect and prevent unauthorized access or malicious activities. So these baseline standards should be periodically reviewed and updated to ensure compliance with the latest industry best practices and recommendations from vendors or organizations. Once again, procedures in the LAN domain, they're going to outline the step-by-step instructions for various activities related to the network management and security. They may include the configuration and maintenance of the network devices, the response to audit processing failures, monitoring the firewall port for protocol alerts, regular monitoring of Wi-Fi access points, and the retention of audit records. So these procedures provide clear guidance on how to perform specific tasks and ensure that proper security measures are in place. Guidelines provide additional recommendations and information to support the implementation of LAN security policies. They may include acquisition guidelines that specify preferred vendors or suppliers for network devices. May have the descriptions of threats and countermeasures, and that's used to raise awareness among network administrators and users. So these guidelines help establish, or they're to help enhance the understanding of potential risk and provide guidance on how to address them effectively. Now, the LAN to WAN domain, this covers the connection between the LAN, the local area network, and the wide area network. And this is something typically through a network perimeter or gateway. So this interface is critical for controlling access to external networks, such as the internet, and protecting the organization's internal resources as well. So some different types of policies associated with the LAN to WAN domain include the control standards, baseline standards, procedures, and guidelines. So control standards in the LAN to WAN domain, this focuses on access control to the internet and traffic filtering. So these standards ensure that only authorized users and devices can access the internet and define rules for filtering inbound, outbound network traffic. So some of the access control mechanisms, these may include firewalls, proxy servers, or some other security devices that enforce the security policies to the LAN at the LAN to WAN boundary. Now, once again, the baseline standards in the LAN to WAN domain, this specifies the specific technology requirements for perimeter devices, such as routers, firewalls, and intrusion prevention systems. These standards outline the necessary configuration, protocols, and security features that should be implemented to ensure the network perimeter. Now, baseline standards ensure consistency and best practices in securing the LAN to WAN connection. Now, procedures, once again, are going to provide step-by-step instructions. For the LAN to WAN, it's going to cover the configuration and management of the devices and the systems at the network perimeter. So these procedures can cover aspects such as the configuration of access control list or the firewall rules to control the traffic flow, as well as patch management processes to ensure that the perimeter devices are up to date with the latest security patches and firmware updates. The guidelines in the LAN to WAN domain, these provide additional recommendations for securing the network perimeter. So these may include guidelines for setting up a DMZ, segregated network segment. It's going to provide an additional layer of security for the internet facing services. Other guidelines may include the implementation of an intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems that's used to detect and prevent unauthorized access attempts, as well as contact content filtering mechanisms to control and monitor internet usage within the organization. Now, the wide area network domain, this covers the network infrastructure and protocols that enable connectivity between the different sites and remote locations of an organization. So it's important to establish policies that govern the WAN domain to ensure there's secure and reliable communication across the network. The control standards for the WAN domain focuses on areas such as WAN management, domain name services, router security, protocols, and web services. So these standards define the requirements and practices for managing and securing the WAN infrastructure. They're going to address aspects such as access control to the WAN devices, the secure configuration, use of specific protocols, and guidelines for utilizing web services securely. The baseline standards in the WAN domain involve reviewing and adopting standards recommended by vendors and industry organizations. So these standards provide a baseline for configuring and securing WAN devices, ensuring that they meet the industry best practices and security recommendations. So by aligning with established standards, organizations can benefit from the proven approaches to WAN security. Now, the procedures within the WAN domain, they outline the step-by-step instructions for configuring and managing WAN devices, such as your routers and your firewalls. These procedures cover aspects like the configuration of routing protocols, firewall rules, and VPN connections. Also, procedures for change management ensure that any changes made to the WAN infrastructure, they're properly planned, documented, and tested to minimize disruptions and security risks. Now, the guidelines in the WAN domain provide additional recommendations for specific areas of WAN operation and management. For example, they may define when and how web services can be used within a web WAN environment, including security considerations and best practices. DNS management guidelines may cover configuration and security of DNS servers, both in the LAN and the WAN environments. That's to ensure reliable and secure name resolution. The remote access domain covers policies and procedures that govern secure access to organization resources from remote locations. So, with the increasing trend of remote work, and the need for employees to connect to corporate networks from outside of the office, it's important to establish a robust policy to ensure the security of remote access. So, control standards in remote access domains, these focus on areas such as VPNs, the virtual private networks, and multi-factor authentication. So, the VPN connections, they enable secure communication between remote devices and an organization's network infrastructure, while multi-factor authentication adds additional layer of security by requiring multiple factors such as your passwords, security tokens, or biometrics for user authentication. Now, the baseline standards in remote access domain involve defining specific requirements for VPN gateways, VPN client options, and security recommendation for Radius, the remote authentication dial-in user service. These standards ensure that the organization's remote access infrastructure is configured securely, utilizing recommended VPN technologies and authentication mechanisms. Now, the procedures within the remote access domain, these provide step-by-step instructions for configuring and troubleshooting VPN connections. So these processes cover aspects such as VPN setup, authentication configuration, encryption protocols, and debugging techniques. The guidelines of the remote access domain provide additional information on threats related to remote access and recommendations for securing remote computing environments. So these guidelines may include the best practices for securing home offices or remote workspaces, protecting sensitive data while accessing it remotely, and securing the devices used for remote access. The systems application domain, this covers policies and procedures that govern the security of information systems and the applications within an organization. So these policies ensure the protection, integrity, and availability of critical asset applications and systems. So some of the different components include the control systems, and the control systems in the system application domain. This focuses on various aspects such as asset classification, assigning accountability, and implementing logical or physical access control measures. So the asset clarification involves categorizing information systems and applications based on their criticality and sensitivity, allowing for the implementation of appropriate security controls. Assigning accountability ensures that individuals or teams are responsible for the security of specific assets. The logical and physical access controls, they dictate the mechanisms for granting authorized users access to systems and applications and protecting them from unauthorized access. The baseline standards in the system application domain, they're going to outline specific technology requirements for each device, ensuring that the system and application are configured securely. They may include standards for public key infrastructure, certification authority, and that's going to establish the rules and procedures for managing digital certificates and encryption keys. Also, approved cryptographic algorithms and key link standards to ensure the use of secure encryption techniques. Now, physical security baseline standards ensure that the protection of physical assets related to the systems and applications. Also, lastly, developing coding standards may define secure coding practices to prevent vulnerabilities in software development. Now, procedures within the system application domain, what's going to provide step-by-step instructions. These instructions are going to be used for configuring systems and applications, as well as managing changes to them. These procedures cover aspects such as system setup, secure application development practices, vulnerability patching, and change management process. So by following these standardized procedures, organizations can ensure that systems and applications are properly configured, maintained, and updated in a secure manner. Now, the guidelines in the system application domain, these include recommendations for acquisitions, such as preferred vendors or criteria for selecting secure systems and applications. They're also going to provide descriptions of threats and countermeasures, educating users and administrators about potential risks and how to mitigate them effectively. The telecommunications domain, this covers policies and procedures that govern the security and telecommunication systems and networks within the organization. These policies ensure that the secure transmission of voice and data communications, protect against unauthorized access, and maintain the integrity and availability of telecommunications infrastructure. So the control standards in the telecommunications domain focuses on protecting telecommunications systems and networks. So this includes the use of Federal Information Process Standards encryption to secure sensitive communication data. Additionally, segregation of data and voice networks ensure that the voice traffic and data traffic are separated, reducing the risk of unauthorized access or interception. The baseline standards in the telecommunication domain, these define specific technology requirements for each device used in telecommunications. So this ensures that the devices are configured securely and meet the organization's security standards. For example, there may be standards for configuring smartphone enterprise servers to ensure that they meet the necessary security requirements. The use of Bluetooth communications and voice over internet protocol may also have specific standards that are in place to address security considerations. Furthermore, the use of other wireless technologies, such as Wi-Fi, may have baseline standards to ensure secure implementation as well. The procedures within the technical communication domain, once again, are going to provide step-by-step instructions for configuring and managing telecommunication devices, and systems. Now, these procedures are going to cover areas such as device configuration, network setup, and response protocols for incidents, such as reporting a lost or stolen employer issued smartphone. Now, the guidelines in the telecommunication domain, these may include recommendations and best practices for designing and VoIP systems and implementing security measures. Now, these guidelines are going to help organizations make informed decisions about their telecommunication infrastructure and needs and ensure the adoption of secure practices. Now, developing effective IT infrastructure security policies is crucial for ensuring the protection of an organization's information assets and technology infrastructure. So, some of the best practices to consider when creating and maintaining these policies. First, you want to select a framework such as ISO or COBIT. So, what you choose a recognized framework as the basis for developing your IT infrastructure policies, security policies. These frameworks are going to provide a comprehensive guidelines and best practices for managing and securing information technology. Now, based off the selected framework, you want to identify the specific requirements and standards that align with your organization's objectives, the industry regulations, and best practices. So these requirements and standards should cover various aspects of the IT infrastructure security. And this includes network security, access control, data protection, incident response, and business continuity. You also want to regularly review and adapt your IT infrastructure security policies to keep them up to date with the evolving threat landscapes, technological advancements, and change in business operations. So you want to perform periodic risk assessments to identify new risks and vulnerabilities. That may require updates to your policies. Also, you want to stay informed about emerging security standards and industry trends to ensure your policies remain effective. Some additional recommendations. You want to ensure that your IT infrastructure security policies and standards are accessible to all employees within the organization. So, this promotes transparency and allows individuals to understand the responsibilities and the expectations regarding information security. So, you may want to consider utilizing a central repository or intranet where employees can easily access and reference those documents. You want to maintain consistency in the structure, format, and language used across your IT infrastructure security policies. So, this cohesiveness makes it easier for users to navigate and comprehend the content. Use a standardized template or style guide to ensure uniformity and clarity throughout the policies. You also want to ensure the content of your IT infrastructure security policy is logical, organized, and aligned with industry best practices. So you present information in a clear and concise manner. Avoid unnecessary technological jargon or complex terminology. Use headings, subheadings, bullet points to enhance readability and facilitate comprehension. You also want to establish a consistent tone or style across all IT infrastructure security policies to create a unified and professional impression. Now, whether the policies are written in a formal or informal style, maintaining a consistent voice helps convey a cohesive message and reinforces the importance of information security throughout the organization. When you're developing IT infrastructure security policies, you want to focus on including essential and relevant information, avoid unnecessary details or excessive content that may dilute the message or confuse readers. Keeping the policies concise and to the point enhances readability and increases the likelihood of employees understanding and following the guidelines. You also want to ensure that the content of your IT infrastructure security policy aligns with the overall security objectives and the organization's goals. So stick to the core principles and objectives of information security and avoid unrelated topics. So this helps maintain clarity and consistency throughout the policies. Now, if you have a centralized repository or library for your IT infrastructure security policies, make sure it's searchable and user friendly. So implementing effective search functionality and categorization allows employees to quickly locate the policies and standards they need. Consider using tags, keywords, or an organized dictionary structure to enhance the searchability and accessibility of the documents. Also, distribute ownership and responsibility for different sections or aspects of the IT infrastructure security policies to the appropriate stakeholders. You want to involve subject matter experts, department heads, and individuals responsible for specific areas to ensure that the policies are comprehensive and reflect the diverse requirements of the organization. So, by doing this, you can tap into the expertise and knowledge of different teams and promote a sense of shared responsibility of information security. There are policies that cover cloud security. The ISO 27017, that's a standard that specifically focuses on information security controls for cloud services. Now, it builds on the foundations provided by the ISO 27002. It extends those principles and guidelines to address cloud specific considerations. Now, in addition to the controls outlined in the ISO 27002, the ISO 27017, it also introduces 7 new controls that are specifically relevant to cloud computing environment. These additional controls aim to address the unique risk and challenges associated with cloud services. Some of these include an agreement on shared or divided security responsibility between the customer and the cloud provider, how assets are returned or removed from the cloud when the contract is terminated. Cloud provider must separate customers' vital virtual environment from other customers or outside parties. The customer and the cloud provider must ensure that the virtual machines are hardened. CLD 12.1.5 states it's solely the customer's responsibility to define and manage administrative operations. 12.4.5 says the cloud provider's capabilities must enable the customer to monitor their own cloud environment. And then CLD 13.1.4 says the virtual network environment must be configured so it at least meets the basic standards. So as we finish up chapter 10, we have talked about the elements of information security policy, policies associated with the various domains of a typical IT infrastructure, and then the best practices and creating and maintaining the IT policies.